Everyone. Oh, there it goes. The recording's on. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Tricia McCollin, and I'm here with my peers today. And we're going to discuss the importance of self-care in counseling supervision, and we're going to actually practice this a little bit too. So it'll be fun and more of an experiential. So feel free to have your cell phones out for the second half because we have some QR codes for you, and we're going to have a lot of time for questions at the end. Deb, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Deborah Pettis. And how about Brooke?
Hi guys, I'm Brooke Murphy, and I will go on ahead and try to tell you about our objectives for this presentation. And to hit on what Dr. McCollin says, the organization of this presentation is that we're going to hit you with some highlights about self-care, probably a little information that you've already heard before, but just kind of hit through all those highlights, and then there's going to be an experiential section at the end. So if you don't mind holding any comments or questions until the end, after our experiential part, we would appreciate that because we're going to try to get through all these highlights real quick. So our objectives are, we're hoping at the end of this that you'll feel like you've learned something about self-care and some self-care techniques. We're hoping that you'll learn a little bit more about how self-care relates to the foundations of counseling and the counselor identity. We also hope that you feel like you were able to explore how to incorporate self-care into your supervisory sessions, and that you feel a little bit more exploratory about how to incorporate that self-care into your daily life.
Okay, so as we think about self-care and why this is important, right? Our profession has a very high rate of burnout. And so we really want to make sure that we are prioritizing taking care of ourselves and prioritizing as supervisors that we're encouraging our supervisees to take care of themselves. And really just that we don't impact our clients, we don't have any sort of burnout in the profession. So really that's what we're going to focus on as we go through the presentation.
Okay, so self-care, where do we even start? Let's start with the definition. So the World Health Organization attempts to define self-care in a succinct way. And basically what they say is that it's any activity that's going to help benefit your health, your personal life, and in your professional life. So it's any activity that's going to help with enhancing health, that's going to help prevent disease, limit illness, and restore health, again, in both your personal and your professional life. So why is this important to counselors? Basically, why do we care? So again, self-care defined is any activity that is going to help us prevent impairment. So it's really any conscious activity that we're engaging in to help prevent impairment, and also to help us prevent certain problems like burnout and vicarious trauma that we are going to encounter, because there are just stress factors that are so unique to what we do. And we all love this quote. We joke that I think we should even just get it tattooed on our hand. You cannot give away that which you do not possess. So what does that mean? It just means we've got to take care of ourselves before we're able to take care of others. So we've already said that self-care aids in protecting us and our wellness, but really it also helps us to aid in protecting our clients too. So self-care and the counselor identity. One of the major aspects of developing our counselor identity is understanding and really believing in our responsibility to ethical concerns for us and for our clients. So the ACA Code of Ethics, we're all familiar with this. We probably have it laminated and placed in 10 different parts of our office, but it does hit on self-care multiple times. It says that it's a necessary part. Self-care is for us as counselors, and we have a responsibility to seek help if we're ever impaired. But the other part to that is that it's also the responsibility of counselors in training. And it says that it's our duty as colleagues, even with our supervisees, to recognize impairment and to help our supervisees take appropriate action should self-care not be addressed or should impairment become a concern. So now we're saying that self-care is important for our own wellness. We're saying that it's important for the wellness of our clients. And now we're saying that it's also our responsibility for our supervisees. And we'll expand on the supervisee part a little bit later in the presentation. But again, to hit on this, it's just so important that we keep talking about the prevention of burnout. We said burnout, we said vicarious trauma in the last slide, compassion fatigue. These are things that are very important to try to prevent, because we are so emotionally impacted in our jobs. I mean, we're exposed to the suffering of our clients, and sometimes even in our workplace, we might not have the emotional support that we need. This compassion fatigue and this professional burnout, it is such an important thing to avoid and to make sure it doesn't create impairment because of, I mean, ethical concerns, we've already listed it all, but another important part on this slide is to say that it is not abnormal to have these types of reactions in these circumstances. So the challenge for us is to say we need to address it, we need to acknowledge it, and we need to manage it, but we also need to make sure we don't pathologize reactions such as compassion fatigue and burnout.
Okay, so just a quick question, and you guys can throw this in the chat. Like, how are you defining self-care? What does that look like in your life? And I'll give you guys a second to type it in there so that I can see your thoughts, but feel free to put whatever you were thinking in there. Yes, definitely. We need to recharge. Nice. Yes, I love that. Time with your dog. I love that one. Okay, so give me some examples of self-care in your life. Yes, therapy for myself. Absolutely. I think that's one that gets overlooked really quickly for counselors, is that we have our own therapy, right? Yes, exercise. Oh, there you go. I love that. Unapologetic and making time for my wellness. I love that unapologetic part. How often do we feel like we always have to apologize for taking care of ourselves, right? Setting aside quiet time. Yep. Hiking, biking, anything outside. Love it. I love it. Absolutely. Those are all really, really great examples. And as you guys are thinking about that, it really kind of falls into these groups that you guys listed, right? So our physical one, we talked about hiking and getting outside. Emotional, how about that? Unapologetically taking care of myself, right? Social, spending time with dogs, spending time with maybe friends, and then any spiritual time alone, getting out into nature, things like that. So you guys absolutely broke it down and got it in those categories, but I also want you to think about it a little bit differently. And that is, there's actually a self-care wheel. And as we are looking at the ways that we take care of ourselves, our goal is to hit all 6 of these categories. And so that we are taking care of ourselves, not just in one aspect, but in a more holistic approach. So what I'm going to do on the next slide is go through these 6, but we're going to go through kind of the way that they're typically seen, and then the way that they're categorized specifically on this wheel. So physical pretty much translates both, right? So anything you can think of physically, your nutrition, taking care of you medically, sleep, exercise, things like that. So pick something or 1 or 2 things in that category for yourself and kind of jot them down and be like, okay, this is what makes sense for me, and this is where I'm going to focus on for that category, right? Psychological, it actually kind of hit a little bit into professional on that wheel. Consultation, right? We are counselors. We are all about relationships. So making sure that we're doing some connection with colleagues, connection with a supervisor. As someone else mentioned, seeing a therapist of our own is always super helpful. From a social perspective, and this is listed as personal on the wheel, making sure that you're going out and connecting with people in a way that makes sense to you. If you don't enjoy hanging out with people, maybe not everybody around you is somebody you want to spend time with after a long day. You just want to spend time on your own. There's nothing wrong with that. That is self-care, recognizing that I've given to everyone all day long, and at the end of the day, I don't want to do more social activity. I really just kind of want to take care of me. Or I get to the end of the day and I've taken care of everyone else, so now I just want to check out and be overly social. Like, whatever makes sense for you, but it's finding what that is that meets your needs. And I love the one about spending time with your dog. That is social. So whatever works for you, making sure that it meets your personality and your style. And then think emotionally. This one's the same, really for the wheel. But think about who you can talk to. Who do you have in your world where you can be emotionally safe, where you can talk about how you're feeling? I love the thought of even the consultation here, because if I have a really stressful counseling day, I don't necessarily want to go talk to my spouse or, my family. I want to talk to maybe a colleague who's like, oh, I get that. I understand what that emotional space looks like. And so just really finding that way to connect emotionally. And then from a creative standpoint, and that was personal on that wheel as well, having a regular outlet for your creativity, right? And that can look like so many things. Like, do you love music? Do you love painting? Do you like baking? Do you like your garden? Like whatever ways that you can kind of give yourself that outlet in a creative fashion. And then from a spiritual perspective, just whatever practices make sense to you, whether it be in an actually like religious setting, whether it be in a more outdoor setting, like there's no right or wrong here. It's really just finding the ways that make sense for you. So in each of those categories, just being able to jot down a couple of things that you really want to think about and that you really want to utilize. And so, sorry, I should probably look at the slide that I switched to. So just remember that we are trying to utilize it to take care of ourselves in a complete fashion.
And self-care involves so many different things. That that compassion, that that idea of boundaries, of time for yourself. And how do we accomplish this? Because we're all busy, and the last thing we want to do is add one more thing to our plate, because that kind of challenges what we're talking about with self-care. So instead, what we're talking about is breaking it into smaller time frames. I'm not sure about all of you, but for me personally, if it's not like 20 minutes or longer or 45 minutes, it doesn't count. But then I realized that in self-care, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, all these little times add up during the day and can really help us to manage those things. So breaking into smaller time frames, taking a walk between sessions, sitting down and taking a deep breath, going, between supervising or counseling sessions, going and filling your water cup. Those little tiny walks and breaks give your body time to reset itself and refocus and not jump from one to the other. Ask for help or grace or understanding, time, consideration, whatever it is that we need. As counselors, we're so used to being understanding and gracious of others and considering what they need, but also do the same for yourself. Allow yourself to ask for those things that you need, but also not feel bad about doing so. The next slide, we're going to kind of go into a little more about how to build this in, and it's scheduling me time. So sometimes we feel selfish, and then one of the slides that says self-care is not selfish, right? So scheduling me time, waking up earlier for quiet time, staying up maybe a little later after the kids go to bed for some quiet time, taking a walk at lunch, listening to a podcast in the car during your commute, something that's debriefing you and making time for you. And make time to exercise. This can be in the morning before your day starts, taking a walk in the evening to unwind, doing some stretches between sessions, right? You walk one client out, come back in your office, do a little chair yoga, stretch out, make yourself feel a little better, and take those deep breaths, because those are those things that help us with that. And with exercise, think about how it works for you. Is it something that we're focusing on with, active recovery? So in the sense of, do I need to do cardio to exercise and feel better? Or exercise can also be meditation or yoga, something quieter and simpler. So it matches whoever the individual is. For me, I'd love to be able to meditate, but my mind just wanders. So that active meditation is more useful for me. The next slide, we're going to kind of talk about how to build in time for joy. So read a funny book, watch your favorite TV show. Sometimes it's watching the same reruns of a TV show, right? Because you don't have to think about it and gives your brain time to settle. Visit or chat with friends or loved ones, and make sure it's people that you feel comfortable talking to, not somebody that you kind of have to step into that caretaker mode with. Not that we don't want to be caretakers for those in our life, but for self-care, it's got to be that idea of someone that you can just sit back and relax and talk about anything that comes up. Take time to participate in your favorite hobbies or activities, whatever it is that you enjoy. Napping is a great hobby. It's a great time to do things that make you feel joy. I'm a huge fan of napping, but also kind of just being mindful and staying in that one place and doing one thing at a time if you have a lot of assignments to grade or different things like that that you're doing. And most importantly, build in time to do just nothing. Just be. Now let's try it for just a moment. I'm going to ask everybody for 30 seconds to just be. Hey, welcome back. Short little time, quiet time. And this is where this may not be the presentation like you thought, because we're going to ask you to try these things, right? Just be quiet for 30 seconds. Just be centered. Focus on your breathing and just relax. Feel that stress move away. These small little moments that can help us feel so tremendously better. Now we're going to transition into kind of talking about self-care and the counseling field. And as counselors, I really love this this picture here because it talks about the dimensions of wellness. As counselors, we focus on all of these different areas with our clients. So whether it's financial, whether it's spiritual, whether it's academic or career, intellectual, we want to make sure that our clients are finding wellness as a holistic approach. But as counselors, we need to make sure we're doing that same thing. And with counseling and looking at self-care and counseling, how they overlap, the next slide kind of shows that. So what we're looking at is counseling focuses on the development of healthy boundaries, coping skills, and self-care. That's what we're helping our clients do. Self-care is the use of healthy boundaries, coping skills, and grace with oneself. That's what we're trying to help our clients to learn and to practice. But they overlap right there, which is the counselor. So we are teaching people these things. But in order to keep in mind that we are our instrument and to prevent burnout, we need to take care of ourselves. So we need to be practicing both of these for ourselves and allowing ourselves to feel a little more comfortable. Now, the next slide, we're going to talk about how self-care relates to the foundational aspects of counseling. And if we look at this, ACA cites that counselors have an ethical responsibility to increase and protect their wellness. And counselors who focus on their own personal self-care are more likely to help their clients focus on wellness behaviors as well. So research shows that if you're practicing this and role modeling this, it's more likely that we'll pass this on to our clients. It's especially important because counselors are one of the primary instruments in their work. We are our instrument. We experience things with our clients. We need to be present and in the moment. But if we're kind of feeling frazzled or overwhelmed or burned out, we're not going to be able to perform as well as we can. So it's important to keep in mind that this isn't only something we want to do for ourselves as individuals, it's also a responsibility of our field. And we have one more slide kind of talking about how self-care relates to the foundational aspects of counselor identity. And in a study in 2015, self-care behavior was recognized as an essential component for the helping professional practice in the counseling field. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we see this with supervisees and with counselors, but just keep this in mind. It's an essential component for us. So it's not only something that we need to do for ourselves as people, but it's also an expectation for our career. And I'm going to pass now to Brooke.
All right, so self-care and the supervisor relationship. What is there to say about that? So we've already touched on what self-care is, and it's just really what we do to preserve ourselves, right? And we've talked about the different types of self-care: physical, emotional, psychological, mental, spiritual. But how does that manifest in the supervision relationship when we are the supervisor? So supervision is a strategic, pedagogical approach, which is characterized by engagement with your supervisee, helping them with uncertainty, and helping them with the formation of that professional identity that we've already talked about. So it's considered an intervention from our perspective because we're trying to help increase the supervisee's competency as they develop their professional identity. So this next bullet is talking about how supervision does differ from just traditional training, because it's a craft to figure out how to meet your supervisee where they are. So you're trying to figure out where developmentally they are, and you're meeting them with things like non-judgment, compassion, probably validation, helping them understand this is common. You are not different for experiencing this, being able to share your own experiences, being able to discuss your own barriers to self-care, helping make that real for them and make it part of their day-to-day thinking that this is important. So it's also going to help you address issues and concerns that your supervisee brings into that supervision session, and you're trying to help them think this is self-care. It's supposed to be in all of these sessions that we're having because it's supposed to be in everything that I do from here on out. So pretty much supervision is an opportunity to have a structured interaction with your supervisee where you are helping the helper. So this is the opportunity for us as a supervisor to say, if we can model, if we can educate, we can help our supervisee become the helper who helps because they practice what they preach. And then once they teach that, their clients can practice what they preach too. So important considerations as we're finishing thinking about just the whole concept of supervision and why self-care belongs there. Lots of different studies have shown that when you're teaching these counselors in training, the ones who are starting to develop this novice approach to how they're going to be throughout their career, we want to teach them that the self-care is not only important, but research has shown that they're going to have positive personal and professional changes if they can go ahead and make this part of what they do from here on out. And again, this is going to help prevent burnout. It's going to help prevent compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, all the things that we've already touched on, and it's going to help them feel accomplishment in their careers that they're developing.
Okay. So this is my favorite part. So I'm super excited to walk you guys through this. This is kind of the step-by-step process that I work when I work with either students or supervisees to conceptualize kind of what it looks like for them, how to approach this, that sort of thing. So the first thing I always start with is developing their identity, right? I tell them, like, you're a counselor now, and what does that mean? And like how important it is that they start to define what that does mean to them. They are developing their own counselor identity. I'm going to tell them things that may or may not resonate with them, and as long as it's not ethical or unethical, whatever I'm trying to say, as long as it doesn't hit an ethical concern, if it doesn't apply for them, if it doesn't feel like a fit for them, that's okay. They can throw that to the side. They're going to integrate the things that and suggestions and tips and things like that into their counselor identity, but they're not building my counselor identity. I built my own. They have to work hard to develop theirs. And this is kind of hard for them to understand, right? They feel like everything that their professors say, everything their site supervisors say, like, I got to take all that in and take it and make it me. And so I really focus on the importance of them not doing that they make it themselves, and that they only integrate what really feels like makes sense to them. But then I ask them to do something really mean and really awful. I tell them to think about everything awful they've ever experienced in their whole wide world. And yeah, all my students and supervisees look at me and they give me the space and they're like, you're horrible. Yes, I am. I want you to think about all of those things, because everything that you're thinking of, everything that's coming up for you, those are all your blind spots. Those are all the things that are going to show up in the counseling space. And so as you're thinking about these awful things, realize that you need to go get counseling about that. If any of those things are triggering for you, if any of those things are super bothersome, go get your own therapy for that. But let's assume that you've already done therapy and you're really healthy. As you're thinking about those things, I want you to remember that those are still potential to come up in the therapy setting. And so then I really want to talk about countertransference, right? And what that means, and how, if my uncle who rode Harley Davidsons was killed in a motorcycle accident, and I have a client who walks in that looks like him, you better believe I'm going to be triggered by that. Or if a client walks in and they just had somebody who died in a motorcycle accident, I can be triggered by that. So just really understanding all the different ways that those things that they thought about can then show up in the counseling space. And I remind them that it's not a matter of if it shows up, it's a matter of when. And that you really need to understand that that's what it looks like, that's what's going to happen, and then create a plan to address that, right? And so I will ask them, like, what is your plan? How are you going to address this? When this shows up in the counseling space and you are triggered, what are you going to do? And make sure that they each have a plan, right? We talk from small triggers and being able to kind of put that in a box and put it behind us and kind of leave it for later when they're going to come process with me. But we also talk about the big ones. What if you are on the verge of tears? Like, it was such a big trigger you can't maintain. So we really talk about like how this is going to impact them and what they need to do to have a plan. But then I ask them that very next question: how much of someone else's pain can you handle? That's what we do every day, right? We handle everyone else's pain. And so I ask them, like, how much of someone else's pain can you handle before it becomes too much? Because when it becomes too much, your brain shouts out as loud as it can, it needs to stop. And that's when we do bad therapy, right? We fix it. We try and tell our clients what to do. We start telling them our stories, like whatever it is to get their pain to stop because it's too much for us. And so I really want them to understand, like, there is a threshold, and what is your plan for when you reach that threshold? And the way we deal with these blind spots, the countertransference, others' pain, is self-care. And that's how I build it up for them so they can understand how important it is for them to take care of themselves. And I do something really sneaky, right? Just like what Trisha was talking about earlier, where, if you can grab 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. What I ask my students and my supervisees to do is to give themselves 5 minutes at the start of the day. Not everybody's the morning person. If you have, your time for self-care in the morning, awesome. But for those who don't, I ask them the first 5 minutes to do something intentional for themselves. Doesn't have to be big. It's only 5 minutes. But what happens is if I start my day intentionally taking care of me, I now have a lot more to give everyone else. And if I go throughout my day where I've never taken care of me and I'm giving to everyone else, I'm dry by the end of the day. Right? I'm completely sucked dry. So I ask my students and my supervisees to commit to something that they can do in the first 5 minutes of waking up that really just feeds themselves intentionally. And we talk that through and we really reinforce like how important that is and what a difference that can make in just starting your day that way. Now, your bigger self-care may come later, and that's fine. It's not about doing what I think you need to do. It's about just giving yourself that way to start your day and then incorporating in a way that makes sense to you. When we talk about boundaries, right? I'm going to tell you as a professor that not every site supervisor has really great boundaries for their students. And they will say, hey, I know you're done at 12, but can you stay till like 2 or 3? I have a couple more clients for you. And we really have to walk our students through that. No, I can't. I'm done at noon. I can't help everyone. When clients push them and say, hey, I can't meet until, 2 hours after you're gone. Can you stay anyway? Everything inside them wants to help and they want to say yes. And so we really have to talk about, if you're practicing healthy self-care, that means that you have solid boundaries, and the world isn't going to have boundaries for you. You have to have them for yourself. And so we really focus on how they can do that and that connection with self-care and having boundaries. And then I talk about the importance of self-reflection, right? I want my students to get to the end of the day and reflect back and look, okay, what did I do well today? Where did I struggle? What do I need to fix for this client next week? What do I need to fix for all clients tomorrow? Let me really sit and wrestle through the tough things that happened that came up in session today. And then I box it and leave it. And I walk out the door and it stays at my desk. And that self-reflection piece is another form of self-care where I don't take my clients home with me. They don't wake me up at 3 a.m. I already reflected on them. They get to stay here for the day. And now I get to go and live my life and really create self-care and boundaries, right? We're connecting all of that. And then the one thing I always follow up with that is that that's the most important skill for us as counselors, but the most important skill that I want you to have in the counseling space is listening. Our students and our supervisees get so wrapped up in their skills and trying to demonstrate those skills that they forget to listen. And so I really focus on, if you're practicing healthy self-care, if you have those boundaries, if you're reflecting, it's going to make it a lot easier to just listen to your clients and provide them that space to just be genuinely there with them. And then those skills will naturally start to flow. So that's a little bit of how I walk my students through it and my supervisees so they can see the importance of self-care and why we do it the way we do. But I want to give you guys just some additional things to kind of think about, right, as we're thinking self-care. So what am I going to talk with them about? Well, I want to talk about, are you sleeping? I mean, they're students, they're new in the profession, they're probably not sleeping as much as they need to, right? We want to talk about that. If you have ever asked some of the students or supervisees like what they're doing food-wise, it is not awesome. And so I just want to point out some of those things, right? Make sure you're eating, make sure you're sleeping, make sure you're doing whatever exercise makes sense for you. Make sure you're having that emotional outlet. Make sure that you're doing all of those things, right, that are going to take care of you. Have healthy boundaries, but have good friendships. Have those people that can really support you, right? I love this last one, asking for when needed. I think that our students are really bad at this, but I think as counselors, sometimes we're really bad at this, right? I'm a counselor, I got this, I take care of everyone else. I forget to take care of me or ask when I need help. And then obviously spiritual in whatever sense that means to you. And then of course, mentally, I have to have myself in a good mental space to help my supervisees or students and to help my clients and to help them help theirs as well.
If I unmute myself. So we are going to get creative now. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do is pull out your cell phone, right? This isn't the normal training, but we're going to ask you to pull out your cell phone and you can try this. If you click on the QR code, it's going to take you to a coloring book. And what would be the benefits of this? Why? It's a healthy way to release stress through mindfulness. It's a quiet activity that we can do, and it calms the brain and helps your body relax. It can help improve your sleep and reduce fatigue while decreasing body aches, heartaches, respiration, and feelings of depression and anxiety. Now, who would think that coloring would do all this? Now, when you click on that and you try it, why don't, if you want, you can share some thoughts with us, and you can click on your camera too if you'd like to share them verbally at this point. We'd love to hear your voices. But think about what this is like. Asking someone to color. As supervisors, we can do this with our students, with our supervisees, and have them have this QR code, let them use it, or the site, because it'll take you there, and they can use it and have it on their phone. For clients, this is wonderful too, because it's something they can utilize in their home, whenever they're waiting in line, if they're feeling stressed out, waiting for something, or they're stuck in traffic. Of course, not while they're driving, but when they're stuck sitting in traffic, it's something that we can do. And there's other ways too that we can use this with supervision, of having it just provided during supervision, right? We'll take a couple minutes at the end of supervision to kind of focus on this. One thing that I found teaching my students, especially those that are in practicum or internship or dissertation, when I get something silly and I assign it, because they won't do it if I don't, but I'll ask them, like, I'll share this QR code and I'll say, let's color for a minute. We're going to color for the last 10 minutes of class and just talk about what it feels like. So if any of you trying it, if you want to share either in the chat or if you want to come on camera and share verbally with us, what are you thinking of this idea of coloring and the app of coloring? There's a lot of different ones, but this is just the one we chose. Any thoughts? Okay, so it is relaxing. I'm a huge fan of coloring too. Coloring books, coloring crayons. This makes it mobile, right? Yeah, it's a good way because of the numbers. It forces you to focus, right? This one does. So it's not just kind of stressing you of what colors to do where, but instead it's forcing us to kind of take that time, focus on it. Any other thoughts? Anybody want to share verbally what they think? Share your picture. You can turn your camera on and share it with us if you'd like. But this is one of my favorite activities. And like I said, I use it with my supervisees. I use it with my doc students, my master students, but I've also used it with clients. And it's a great thing because in today's day and age, once they have that QR code, they can save it to their screen and they have it with them. And it's something they can utilize whenever they need it, because often people aren't away from their phones. Another form of self-care would be disconnecting from technology, but that's a tougher one to do. So this might be an easier way to use that technology to help people do this. All right.
Yeah.
We have another one, right?
And I was just, no, I was just going to say, like, I also love the coloring for like resistant teens. If a teen's not really wanting to talk, you get them doing something like coloring and suddenly they have so much to say. So in addition to self-care, I also use tricks like this to help my supervisees and students when they're struggling with like a resistant client or something that they can't figure out how to move forward on.
It's also something that we could share in virtual counseling or distance counseling. So online, it's something that you can share. They could pull it up on their phone, or they can enter the website and they can color while they're in session with you as we're talking and talk about it that way as well. You're going to talk about the beat maker now.
Yes, and I'm just going to tell you that music is huge. I absolutely love using music as a counselor with my clients, as a supervisor and a professor with my students or with my supervisees. music is just awesome. And there's so many different ways that we can utilize this. And I love the impact that music has on your brain. Some of the things I snap that QR code and start, kind of playing with it while I'm talking. But what I absolutely love, and I think oftentimes we kind of forget how impactful music can be, but especially with our kids and teens, like music, they have their phones all the time. They have headphones on all the time. They are listening to something all the time. And so what I've noticed though, right, is I have a client who's depressed. I ask them what they're listening to. It's depressing music. Well, let's talk about that. Like, isn't that going to make you more depressed? Like, what if we pick a playlist that's really upbeat and exciting? And why don't you create that playlist and let's play with it, mess with it this week and then come back and tell me. And inevitably they come back and like, I feel a lot better. Yes, because music is so impactful. So I love this one. I don't know how much you guys have played with it, because you get to create your own. And that's really fun, right? It's not just that I'm listening to music or that I'm, working on it or I create these playlists, but this one I actually get to make my own. And then after I've messed with it a little bit and play, I get to hear what I created. And I think this one is so much fun because of that one. So tell me what you guys think about this.
I've also seen it used in group therapy or in couples therapy or family therapy, where everybody gets to kind of put a part to it, and then they create a couple song or a group song or things like that. What are your thoughts? Again, feel free to join us on camera if you'd like.
Yes, me too, Serena. So much fun. Music is one of my favorite ways to discuss how we can care for ourselves, whether it be with clients or whether it's with students or supervisees. I love using music. Anybody else? Do you make something awesome that you're super excited about?
Anybody want to share?
It's okay. Everybody wants to keep it for themselves. I can appreciate that. It is self-care, not Deborah care. I can appreciate that. So, all right, I'm going to pass this along to Brooke for the next one.
And wrapping up the music conversation, I'm loving reading the chat and seeing just how present that really is universally for everybody. And I think what that was just making me think was, we probably have clients, but definitely supervisees and students who are resistant to the self-care concept. And they probably say, I don't have time, I don't know how. But if we can change our thinking, and actually when we are listening to music, telling ourselves, I'm going to start labeling that as self-care, I'm going to be more present and intentional with it, you might be changing even those thought patterns of, maybe I do practice self-care, maybe I can, maybe I already do, and that's something that I can grab onto and expand, instead of I just can't. So I think that's really interesting. And maybe I'll piggyback on that and say, I think we all breathe all day long. Now, do we breathe correctly? Probably not. But what I want to do is, if you would go ahead and get your phone out and let's click this QR code, and just hang tight. When you click it and go to the website, it's going to show you just a big circle. Wait for it. It's going to count down for you. Let's just take about, 15 to 30 seconds to close our eyes. I guess you can't really close your eyes if you're watching it, but to just kind of center and breathe through this. Try to kind of close everything else out and just focus on your breathing, your body, and what is happening for you as you are breathing in and out in a way that you maybe don't remember to all the time. So let's just take a second and practice. I will jump in here and tell you, when you're using this app or this website, if you go to those 3 lines in that upper right-hand corner, you'll be able to go to the settings, and it will let you make adjustments to things like breathe in, hold breath, breathe out, hold breath. It lets you tailor this. So perhaps you or even a client or supervisee is not so used to this deep belly breathing, and they can legitimately pass out if they're breathing in and out too long and offloading too much carbon dioxide. So this is when you can tell them, let's have let's shorten our breathe in or our breathe out, or let's do that box breathing or that 4-7-8 breathing where we're having a hold and letting those lungs really expand and letting those alveoli really get all that last bit of that sweet oxygen out. So this really lets you tailor it to where somebody might be in their journey for learning really how to diaphragmatically breathe. And so obviously, why is this important? Well, we're breathing all day long, but if we're not breathing right, it really can have different effects on us. So the deep part of this deep breathing, it can allow you to have muscle relaxation and reduce that strain in your muscles. It can help lower blood pressure. It can increase the oxygen in the blood and decrease the carbon dioxide in the blood. And it can help to reduce your heart rate. It can help signal to your body throughout that highway of your blood and your circulatory system, I'm okay, because my blood says so.
Mhm. And what I love about this is that these all can be combined, right? So you could be doing the breathing and focusing on, your heart rate and your breathing when you're doing the coloring versus music. And I saw in the chat, a lot of people are saying, they've used it to do their example of their life through music or things like that. I worked in a state prison, and what I did is I used the art of their tattoos to tell me their life story. So they would come in and tell me it according to that. So there's so many different ways that we can use art, music, and attach those to breathing. So like when we're feeling tired and worn out, maybe I'm going to listen to a more upbeat song and pick myself up a little more. Maybe taking those deep breaths are going to give me that oxygen and increase my energy level. But also at other times when I need to relax, if I'm listening to quieter music, or maybe doing the coloring and taking those deep breaths, but that slow rate, it's going to calm me down as well. So, and it's this tricky little idea that these little things that we're already doing, listening to music or coloring or just taking some time away, breathing. We breathe all the time, but just focusing on this, these are those ways, like Brooke said, we can sneak it into this idea of what self-care is versus what people think. Another way you could do the breathing also is if we hit, if you're driving to work, I deal with students who have a long commute, and sometimes they'll say, oh, I'm so annoyed with traffic. Every time you hit a red light, take 3, deep breaths while you're sitting at that light. Or listen to music that's going to be soothing or interesting to you while you're in the car, or podcasts, or whatever it is that's something that you wouldn't normally have time to do, and use that time on the commute. So there's so many different ways that we can sneak this in. And now we're going to go to questions or thoughts. So if you would like to share, come on camera. We'd like to hear any questions that you have about how to apply this, or thoughts about how you have applied it or can imagine using these things. We'd love to hear a little bit about your ideas. Or perhaps you're all very relaxed from the breathing now, so we may not hear much. Any thoughts? Any questions?
While you guys are kind of thinking about any questions you guys have, I think the big thing that we really wanted to get across is that self-care is exactly that, itself. And it is so important that it is meaningful to the person, not meaningful to me, right? If I am talking about this with students, clients, supervisees, it doesn't matter. It's what's meaningful for them. And I think so many times that people get wrapped up in, well, self-care means I have to go get a massage and I have to, I have to exercise for 2 hours and I don't have time for those things. And so they get wrapped up in the time aspect of self-care. And instead of being able to find what's meaningful for them, they think about the big stuff and like, I don't have time for that, so I can't do this. And so I think it's really important that we find all these little tricks and tips, there we go, to be able to help them conceptualize self-care differently, right? It is great when I can do the bigger stuff, but that doesn't mean that I rule out all the little things I'm either already doing or I can easily incorporate, right? Even little things like, I'm not feeling very well, so I'm going to pick a different food to eat today. That's self-care. And people really discount some of the ways that they're already doing this. And just all these little pieces, even like I told you guys at the beginning, a little while ago with the 5 minutes that I asked from my students or supervisees, it is so impactful. And inevitably my students will come back the next week and they're like, wow, I mean, it really does feel better to spend a little bit of time taking care of me, right? And so it really helps them to conceptualize this differently. So yes, small changes make a big impact. Absolutely.
Yep.
I love that.
Another tricky way to incorporate self-care if you're teaching classes or with supervisees, I offer like 2 points extra credit if they do an assignment on it, or we'll have an assignment where one of our discussion boards is showing a picture of self-care and talking about something they did differently. And it doesn't, again, have to be anything huge. It doesn't have to be anything that costs money. Sometimes it's just that idea of changing your view, taking a different way to work, sitting at sitting out on the porch in a different chair than the one you usually sit in. So it's all that idea of little concepts, those little changes.
And I think we all have a tendency too to get excited about a concept. So maybe self-care is not something someone has heard. So when we hear about it, we get excited and we go big. We're getting a mani-pedi massage every week. You can't keep that up. And then you failed one, and then you're not going to do it anymore. So much research shows that it is so important with trainees, supervisees, that we do teach self-care, but that consistency is crucial. The results of those studies did not show that just one training session on self-care, that it really did not have a very big impact. So as we're developing treatment plans or supervision plans, the fact that it is constant is crucial. And you can't constantly go big, but you can constantly do the little things that build up to big battles.
And with
Yeah.
graduate students and doctoral students, again, building this into each class that we teach, building it in and asking about that. How is it, whether it's a discussion board, whether it's an extra credit assignment, or it's just how we start class off, or even spend the last couple minutes of class doing self-care. There's great videos that you can pull up of 5-minute meditations. And when I've done that for my students, they come back the next week and they're like, that was really useful. Or, hey, I know one student reached out to Deb back when she was my teaching assistant and said, like, the next semester, hey, can I have a link to that video? I need to use it again. So providing those to our students and making this part of their educational journey, but also really ingraining this into our own counselor identity and helping to do the same with our students or supervisees is always important.
Absolutely. And I usually ask my students or supervisees to tell me what their goal is, right? So I'm asking for these 5 minutes. So tell me what that's going to look like. And as a group, we're going to hold each other accountable, right? So they can create a small goal for that 5 minutes. And then I ask them, what is one big change they want to make in self-care over the course of the time that we work together, right? And so then we can check in about both these small little pieces and these big long-term goals, and really try to encourage them and help hold them accountable for incorporating that self-care.
And the last thing we're going to do for self-care is I know some of you have some more trainings or other things you need to do. So we're going to wrap up now so that everyone has time to get to their next training or to anything else they need to do. Our references are here, and our contact information is also on the PowerPoint if you need or would like to reach out to us for any additional information. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and we hope you have a wonderful day.